The twin suns of Ixion 7 cast overlapping shadows across the rusted mech stalls of the fractured bazaar. Dust particles hung suspended in the arid air, catching the light like frozen fireflies. Riven adjusted his patched coat against the heat, the worn fabric doing little to shield his weathered skin from the unforgiving desert world climate. His boots crunched against the parched ground as he moved between the market's makeshift aisles, eyes scanning for salvageable parts. 20 years as a scavenger had taught him to recognize value amid garbage. A compressor coil here, a fusion capacitor there. Each piece represented another day of survival on this forsaken outpost. The bazaar hummed with the multilingual murmur of a dozen species, all united by desperation and the universal language of barter. 30 credits for the power coupling, no less, growled a four-armed vendor, whose exoskeleton clicked with each gesture. Riven shook his head. It's corroded at the junction. 15. 25. And I throw in a handful of neural connectors. Before Riven could counter, a sound cut through the market's din, a soft, pained whimper. Not the mechanical whine of failing servos, but something organic, something young. Most scavengers would have ignored it. Survival on the frontier meant minding your own business. But something in that sound, a note of pure vulnerability, drew Riven toward a collapsed stall near the bazaar's edge. Broken machinery lay scattered beneath a fallen canopy, and from underneath came that sound again. Riven's calloused hands worked quickly, lifting twisted metal and shattered display cases. What he found beneath stopped his breath. A child. No, not human, but humanoid, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the harsh sunlight. Her small frame was connected to a failing cyberspine, neural lights flickering dangerously. Please. The whispered plea came not from the child, but from the shadows behind. A taller figure emerged, a woman of the same species, regal, even in her evident despair. Her silvery eyes held both terror and determination as she knelt beside the child. They found us faster than I expected. Who found you? Riven asked, already examining the child's failing implants with practiced eyes. The Empire. She's forbidden. I'm forbidden. The woman's voice carried the refined accent of the Imperial core worlds. Her name is Luma. I am Sira. Riven recognized the markings on the woman's neck now, the subtle scarification that marked Imperial breeders, genetically engineered for bloodline preservation. Such beings were property, not people. And the child. Her neural core is rejecting the implant, he said, fingers tracing the misaligned connection. Why would they put military-grade tech in a child? Because she wasn't meant to be a child. She was meant to be a vessel. Syra's voice hardened. I was not supposed to love her. That was my defect. Around them, the bazaar continued its commerce, but Riven noted how eyes darted their way, then quickly away. Someone would report them soon. Empire informants were everywhere, especially where credits were scarce. Syra took Riven's hands in hers, her touch cool against his sun-baked skin. Save my baby, human, and I'll be yours forever. The words hung between them, loaded with meaning. Riven didn't want to contemplate. Not now. The child, Luma, made another soft sound, her tiny fingers grasping at nothing. I don't want ownership, he muttered, already reaching for his tool belt. But I can try to stabilize her. After that, we need to move. Fast. Riven worked with mechanical precision, bypassing the failing neural pathways with makeshift connections from his own supplies. The crowd had thinned around them, creating an island of emptiness. Never a good sign. He caught whispers from those brave enough to remain nearby. The exiled one, touching a breeder's child. Imperial hunters will come. Scrap them all, I say. Riven ignored them, focusing instead on the flickering lights along Luma's spine. Each successful connection brought more steady illumination, and with it, more awareness in the child's crystalline eyes. "Almost there," he murmured, more to himself than to Syra, who hovered watchfully. The implant was rejecting her natural growth patterns. Empire tech doesn't account for emotion. "Emotion is inefficiency," Syra recited, as if from a textbook. Then shook her head bitterly. "That's what they engineered out of us. Except they failed with me. And she inherited my flaw." Luma's eyes suddenly focused on Riven, and he felt a curious sensation, like fingers sifting through his thoughts. The child was a telepath, he realized. No wonder the Empire wanted her controlled or destroyed. "There," he said as the last connection stabilized. "It's temporary. Your daughter needs proper medical attention, not scrapyard fixes." "Daughter," Syra repeated the word, like it was foreign to her tongue. "Yes, my daughter." The moment of relief shattered as a high-pitched whine cut through the air. Riven recognized it instantly. Imperial drones. Small, deadly, and programmed to track genetic signatures. "They're here." He scooped Luma into his arms, surprised at how light she felt. "We need to—" 3 metallic spheres burst over the market's edge, their sensors already pulsing red as they locked onto Syra and Luma. Without hesitation, Riven pulled a disruptor from his belt, a jury-rigged device he'd assembled from scavenged parts, technically illegal on any Imperial-controlled world. The first drone exploded in a shower of sparks as the disruptor's electromagnetic pulse hit it. The second and third veered, recalculating, before Riven could target them again. "Run!" he shouted to Syra, who had already gathered Luma from his arms. "East tunnel, behind the fuel depot. Go!" As Syra fled with Luma, Riven fired again, catching the second drone. The third evaded, its sensors still tracking the fleeing pair. Cursing, Riven aimed carefully and fired his last charge. The third drone wobbled, smoke pouring from its guidance system, before crashing into a stack of fuel cells. The explosion would draw more attention. They had minutes, at most. Riven sprinted after Syra and Luma, ignoring the shouts of vendors and the crash of toppling stalls. The disruptor had bought them time, but it had also marked him as a target. No Imperial authority would overlook the destruction of hunter drones. He caught up to them at the tunnel entrance, a forgotten relic of this world's brief mining boom decades ago. Syra stood uncertainly at the threshold. Luma clutched protectively against her chest. "I don't know the way," she admitted. "I've never been outside the pleasure domes before I ran." The confession struck Riven like a physical blow. Imperial breeders lived enclosed lives of luxury and control. For Syra to have escaped at all spoke of extraordinary determination. "I know these tunnels," he said, taking the lead. "Stay close. It's not stable down here." The passage plunged them into darkness, relieved only by the bioluminescent glow of Luma's skin and the occasional emergency light still functioning from the old mining days. The air grew thick with dust and the tang of metal. Somewhere ahead, water dripped in slow, irregular rhythm. "We can't outrun them forever," Syra said after they'd traveled in silence for nearly an hour. "The Empire never stops hunting what belongs to it." "You don't belong to anyone," Riven replied, more sharply than he intended. "Neither does she." Syra's silvery eyes studied him in the dim light. "Why are you helping us? You could have left us in the bazaar. Most would have." Riven's past flickered through his mind. Flashes of a different life, before exile, before scavenging. He pushed the memories away. "Let's just say I understand what it's like to be hunted for existing wrong." Before Syra could press further, a rumble shook the tunnel, dislodging centuries of dust from the ceiling. The vibration grew until it became a roar, machinery, approaching fast. "Driller drones," Riven hissed, recognizing the sound. "They're cutting through from the surface." A section of the tunnel wall exploded inward, 50 meters ahead, showering them with debris. Through the newly formed hole poured a stream of smaller hunter drones, their sensors already sweeping the passage. "Back!" Riven pushed Sierra and Luma toward a side tunnel. "This way!" They scrambled down a narrower passage, the ceiling so low that Riven had to crouch. Behind them, the hunter drones chirped as they detected movement, their pursuit algorithms activating. The passage forked, then forked again. Riven made split-second decisions, guiding them through a labyrinth he'd explored over years of salvage expeditions. But the drones were gaining, unhindered by fatigue or the need to protect a child. "There's a maintenance shaft ahead," he gasped as they rounded another corner. "It leads to a smuggler's outpost. Neutral territory. Even the Empire hesitates to breach it directly." The entrance to the shaft was barely visible, a rusted hatch set into the floor of the tunnel. Riven heaved it open, revealing a vertical drop with ancient rungs embedded in the wall. "I'll go first," he said, already lowering himself. "Pass Luma down to me, then follow." The child weighed almost nothing in his arms as Syra carefully transferred her. Those crystalline eyes stared up at him, unnervingly aware. For a moment, Riven felt that curious mental touch again, a gentle inquiry, not an invasion. Syra descended after them, her movements betraying a grace that spoke of her imperial upbringing. They had made it halfway down when the first drone appeared at the shaft's entrance above them. "Faster," Riven urged, but they were already moving at the limit of safety. The rusted rungs creaked ominously beneath their weight. The drone at the top released a targeting ping that echoed down the shaft. More drones would follow. They needed a diversion. "Take Luma," Riven instructed, transferring the child back to Syra. "Keep going down. At the bottom, head right, then take the second left. Tell Alex that Riven sent you, and that I have the drone mine schematics he wanted." "What are you doing?" Syra's voice was sharp with alarm. "Buying time." Riven reached into his coat and extracted a small, blinking device. "Go, now." He waited only long enough to ensure Syra continued downward with Luma before activating the device, a short-range transmitter that would mimic their biosignatures. Then, he climbed back up, past the point where they had descended, and flung the device as far as he could down a different passage. The drone at the shaft entrance immediately reoriented, zooming off in pursuit of the false signal. Others would follow, but not all. It was a temporary solution at best. Riven scrambled back down the shaft, muscles burning with effort. Below, Syra and Luma had already disappeared from view. Good. They were following his directions. He reached the bottom and sprinted after them, through corridors that grew progressively less abandoned. Evidence of habitation appeared: crude graffiti, discarded containers, the occasional surveillance camera disguised as damage to the walls. The sound of voices grew ahead, not the mechanical chirp of drones, but the varied cadences of a dozen species. Riven caught up to Syra just as she reached the entrance to Alex's domain, a massive cavern transformed into a scrapyard citadel. Smugglers, outlaws, and refugees of all descriptions moved through a maze of salvaged technology and repurposed imperial craft. At the center stood a half-completed ship, its hull a patchwork of materials that had no business functioning together. Sentries intercepted them at the perimeter, a pair of hulking figures with enhanced musculature and weapons fused directly to their modified limbs. "State your business," growled the larger of the two. "I need to see Alex," Riven replied. "Tell him it's Riven, with the schematics." The sentries exchanged glances. Then the smaller one spoke into a comm unit embedded in her throat. After a moment, she nodded. "Follow the red markers. Any deviation will be corrected." They were escorted through the chaotic sprawl of the outpost, past makeshift dwellings and workshops where technology from across the galaxy was dismantled and reconfigured. Eyes followed their progress, some curious, others calculating. Alex's office was the gutted command center of an Imperial frigate, its systems repurposed to control the outpost's defenses. The smuggler himself lounged in what had once been the captain's chair, his features a genetic mosaic that suggested at least 3 different species in his ancestry. "The infamous Riven returns," Alex drawled, eyes flicking from Riven to Syra and Luma. "And with such interesting companions. Imperial stock, unless I miss my guess." "We need passage off-world," Riven said, ignoring the observation. "Immediately." Alex's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Passage is expensive, especially the kind that evades Imperial scanners." Riven reached into his coat and produced a data crystal. "The drone mine schematics, complete with override codes, worth a fortune to the right buyer." Alex's eyes gleamed with undisguised avarice. He took the crystal, examining it in the light, before slotting it into a reader on his chair's arm. Data scrolled across a nearby screen, and the smuggler's lips curved into a predatory smile. "Authentic," he confirmed, "and worth considerably more than a single journey." His gaze shifted to Syra and Luma. "Unless there's something about your companions you're not telling me? The Empire pays handsomely for the return of valuable property." Syra stiffened, her arms tightening protectively around Luma. Riven stepped forward, one hand moving subtly toward the knife concealed at his hip. "They're under my protection," he said quietly. "The schematics buy all 3 of us safe passage. That's the deal." For a tense moment, Alex seemed to consider his options. Then he laughed, the sound unexpectedly genuine. "Always the knight in tarnished armor, Riven. Very well. Passage for 3 on the next outbound ship." He gestured to the half-completed vessel they'd seen earlier. "She launches in 6 hours. Don't be late, and don't bring any Imperial entanglements with you." As they turned to leave, Alex called after them. "There's a holding bay near the south docking clamps. You can wait there. It's defensible, should you need that feature." The holding bay proved to be a reinforced chamber, with a single entrance and emergency supplies cached in wall compartments. Riven secured the door behind them, then began taking inventory of their resources. Syra settled Luma on a makeshift bed of shipping blankets. The child had been unnervingly quiet throughout their flight, but now she reached for her mother with deliberate movements. "She's communicating," Syra explained, noting Riven's observation. "Not with words, but impressions, feelings." "Telepathy," Riven said. "Powerful enough to break through Imperial conditioning." "Yes." Syra stroked Luma's luminescent cheek. "That's why they were going to recycle her. Emotion and telepathy together. Too unpredictable, too dangerous. When I discovered what they planned..." She shook her head. "I had to run. I couldn't let them erase her." Riven found a medical kit and brought it over. "May I? The temporary connections I made will hold better with proper sealant." Syra nodded, helping position Luma so Riven could access her cyberspine. As he worked, the child's consciousness brushed against his again, a gentle touch, inquisitive rather than invasive. "She's asking about you," Syra said softly. "About why you help us." Riven's hands stilled momentarily. "What do you tell her?" "That some humans remember kindness, even at the edge of the Empire." Syra's silvery eyes held his. "But she wants to know from you." The request hung between them. Riven had spent decades avoiding connections, surviving by keeping to himself. But something about this small family of fugitives had breached defenses he'd thought impenetrable. "Tell her," he began, then reconsidered. Instead, he carefully directed his thoughts toward Luma, picturing his answer rather than speaking it. Everyone deserves freedom, even those the Empire tries to own. The child's eyes widened, and a smile, the first he'd seen, transformed her face. The sensation of her consciousness touching his deepened, carrying back a wave of gratitude so pure it left him momentarily breathless. She understands, Syra whispered, watching the exchange with wonder. More than I expected. Riven completed his work on Luma's implants in silence. Mind racing. 6 hours until the ship launched. Would the Empire find them before then? Alex's outpost had formidable defenses, but Imperial resources were virtually limitless. You should rest, he told Syra when he'd finished. Both of you. I'll keep watch. And you? Syra asked. When do you rest? Riven's smile was thin. I'll sleep when we're in hyperspace. Syra didn't argue, settling beside Luma on the makeshift bed. Within minutes, exhaustion claimed them both. Riven positioned himself near the door, tools and weapons arranged within easy reach. As the hours passed, he found himself studying the sleeping pair. There was a rightness to them that transcended the artificial nature of their origins. The Empire had engineered Syra for genetic perfection, had attempted to make Luma a vessel for Imperial consciousness. But neither science nor tyranny had anticipated the power of the bond that now held them together. Riven checked his chronometer. 2 hours until launch. He allowed himself to hope, just briefly, that they might actually escape. The alarm shattered that hope, a wailing siren that echoed throughout the outpost, followed by the unmistakable sound of weapons fire. Syra bolted awake, instinctively gathering Luma into her arms. They found us! Riven was already at the door, checking the external monitors. Imperial shock troops, at least a dozen, with hunter drones for support. He cursed under his breath. Someone sold us out. Alex? Syra suggested, joining him at the console. Maybe. Or any of the 100 others who saw us arrive. Riven accessed the outpost's communication system. Alex, we had a deal. The smuggler's voice crackled through the speaker, punctuated by the sound of defensive systems activating. Deal's still on, Riven. But you didn't mention you were bringing soul hunters down on us. Soul hunters? Riven's blood ran cold. Not ordinary Imperial forces. Then, but specialized units created to track and capture beings with psychic abilities. How many? 3 that we've identified, plus their support units. Alex sounded strained. The ship's ready for immediate launch. If you can reach the main hangar in the next 15 minutes, you're still cleared for departure. Riven checked the bay's secondary exit, a maintenance tunnel that would lead them toward the hangar, but through less defended sections of the outpost. We're moving, he told Alex. Hold them as long as you can. Don't mistake self-interest for charity, the smuggler replied. Just get to the ship before they breach the inner defenses. After that, you're on your own. Riven gathered what supplies he could carry, including weapons salvaged from the emergency cache. Stay close, he instructed Syra. The route to the hangar will be exposed in places. I can help, she said, shifting Luma to one arm while extending her free hand. A shimmer of energy manifested around her fingers. A latent, psychic ability the Empire had engineered into her bloodline. Shielding, limited, but better than nothing. Riven nodded, reassessing his strategy. Save it for when we need it most. Let's move. They slipped into the maintenance tunnel, navigating by the dim, emergency lighting. The sounds of battle grew louder as they approached the central sections of the outpost. Twice, they had to detour around collapsed sections where Imperial bombardment had breached the outer defenses. We're getting close to the hangar, Riven whispered as they reached a junction. But we'll have to cross an exposed corridor. He peered around the corner. The main passage to the hangar lay 20 meters ahead, but between them and safety stood a unit of Imperial troops, standard enforcers, not soul hunters, but deadly nonetheless. I count 6, he told Syra, armed with pulse rifles and neural disruptors. Syra's expression hardened. Luma can sense 3 more approaching from the East Junction, including one of the soul hunters. Riven weighed their options. Direct confrontation would be suicide. Waiting for reinforcements to arrive would guarantee capture. I can create a diversion, he decided. Draw them away long enough for you and Luma to reach the hangar. No. Syra's response was immediate and firm. We stay together. There's no other way. There is. She handed Luma to him, the child's weight settling against his chest with surprising familiarity. My shielding can protect you both, and I can do more than shield. Before Riven could protest, Sira stepped into the corridor, her body suddenly luminous with the same pale blue energy that marked Luma's skin. The Imperial troops turned as one, weapons raised. Primary target acquired, announced their commander. Subdue and capture. The first neural disruptor fired, a weapon designed to incapacitate without killing, perfect for reclaiming valuable property. The energy beam struck Syra's shield and scattered, fragments of it rebounding toward the troops. 2 enforcers dropped. Their own weapons' effects turned against them. The others advanced, adjusting their tactics. Syra's hands moved in precise gestures, Riven recognized as Imperial battle forms, the secret combat techniques taught to the Empire's elite guards. Not something a breeder should know. Go, she called to Riven, her voice strained with effort. I'll follow. He hesitated only a second before obeying, cradling Luma as he sprinted for the hangar entrance. Behind him came the sound of energy weapons discharging, the crack of breaking armor, bodies hitting the floor. The hangar doors loomed ahead, massive metal portals designed to contain atmospheric pressure during launches. One stood partially open, revealing the gleaming hull of Alex's patchwork ship. Riven slipped through the gap, finding himself in organized chaos as the smuggler's crew made final preparations for emergency departure. The ship's engines were already cycling up, their rumble vibrating through the deck plates. Cutting it close. Riven! Alex's voice boomed over the hangar speakers. Where's your blue friend? Before Riven could answer, an explosion rocked the corridor behind him. He turned to see Syra stumbling through the smoke, one arm hanging limp at her side, but still moving. Go back for her, he shouted to 2 nearby crew members, thrusting Luma into the arms of a third. Cover her retreat. The crew hesitated, looking toward their captain for confirmation. Alex's voice crackled again. You heard the man. Move! The crewmen rushed forward, just as the smoke parted, to reveal a towering figure in ornate black armor. A soul hunter, its featureless helmet scanning the hangar with inhuman precision. Time seemed to slow as the hunter raised its weapon. Not a disruptor, but a soul lance, designed to sever psychic connections permanently. Its target, Luma, still clutched in the arms of the startled crewman. Riven moved without thought, throwing himself into the weapon's path as it discharged. Pain beyond imagining tore through him, not physical, but a rending of consciousness itself, as if his very being were being pulled apart at the seams. Through the haze of agony, he was dimly aware of Syra's scream, not fear, but rage. The air around her combusted into blue fire as she unleashed the full force of her abilities, no longer restrained by Imperial conditioning. The soul hunter staggered as the psychic backlash hit it, its armor cracking along invisible fault lines. Syra pressed her advantage, forcing the hunter back through the doorway, where it collided with its approaching comrades. Seal the hangar, Alex ordered from somewhere above. Everyone on board, now! Hands pulled at Riven, dragging his semi-conscious form up the ship's ramp. Through wavering vision, he saw Syra retrieve Luma from the crewmen, saw them both follow him aboard. The hangar doors slammed shut as the last of the crew cleared the ramp. Seconds later, the deck heaved beneath them as the ship's thrusters engaged at emergency power. Brace for acceleration, came the warning, barely audible over the roar of engines pushing beyond safe parameters. The ship lurched, then shot forward into the launch tunnel that would carry them to the surface and freedom. Behind them, muffled explosions signaled the Empire's final assault on the outpost, too late to stop their escape. Riven felt himself slipping toward unconsciousness, the soul lance's effects still cascading through his system. The last thing he registered was Syra's face above his, her silvery eyes filled with determination as she pressed her hands to his temples. "Stay with us," she commanded, her voice echoing strangely in his mind. "Stay with us, Riven." Then darkness claimed him. Riven awoke to the gentle hum of engines in hyperspace transit. He lay in a narrow bunk within what appeared to be the ship's medical bay, a generous term for what was essentially a converted storage room with basic equipment. His body felt leaden, disconnected, as if he were piloting it remotely. The Soul Lance's effects, he realized. The weapon had been designed to sever psychic connections, but in a non-telepath like himself, it had instead scrambled the natural pathways between mind and body. "You're awake." Syra's voice drew his attention to the corner where she sat with Luma curled in her lap. "We weren't certain you would recover." Riven attempted to sit up, managing only to prop himself on one elbow. "How long?" 3 days in hyperspace. We're beyond Imperial reach now." She approached, helping him into a sitting position. "You shouldn't have done that. The lance was meant for Luma." "Yes, but her natural abilities would have provided some protection. You had none." "Wasn't exactly thinking clearly at the time," Riven admitted, his voice raspy from disuse. Luma stirred in Syra's arms, those crystalline eyes opening to fix on Riven with unmistakable recognition. The child reached toward him, small fingers grasping at air. "She's been waiting for you to wake up," Syra said softly. "She's been holding you here, in a way, keeping your mind from drifting too far from your body." The realization that he owed his survival to the child's abilities struck Riven with unexpected force. "Thank you," he said directly to Luma, not certain if she could understand words, but knowing she would sense his gratitude. The cabin door slid open to admit Alex, who surveyed the scene with poorly concealed interest. "Good. You're not dead. That simplifies the business arrangements." "Where are we headed?" Riven asked, ignoring the smuggler's characteristic lack of bedside manner. "Outer Rim. Specifically, Station Helios, an abandoned monitoring post in neutral space. Remote enough that the Empire won't bother looking. Close enough to trading routes that you won't starve." Alex examined his fingernails with exaggerated casualness. "Unless you had another destination in mind." Riven exchanged glances with Syra, who gave a slight nod. Neither of them had planned beyond escape. Any haven would do. "Station Helios will work," Riven confirmed. "What's your price?" Alex's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Consider it covered by the schematics, and by the rather impressive destruction of 3 Imperial soul hunters. That alone has doubled my reputation in certain circles." He moved to leave, then paused at the threshold. "We arrive in 2 days. I suggest you use the time to recover your strength. Station Helios isn't exactly hospitable." After the smuggler departed, Syra settled on the edge of Riven's bunk, Luma still cradled against her chest. "He's right. You need to rest." "So do you," Riven observed, noting the shadows beneath her silvery eyes. "Have you slept at all?" "When necessary." Syra's gaze dropped to Luma, who had drifted back to sleep. "I've been monitoring her implants. And yours." "Mine." Syra's fingers brushed the base of his skull, where a dull ache radiated outward. "The ship's medical scanner found damage from the Soul Lance. I made some adjustments, temporary fixes, like you did for Luma in the bazaar." The symmetry wasn't lost on Riven. "So we're even—" "No." Her eyes met his, fierce with an emotion he couldn't name. "We will never be even, Riven. You saved my daughter when no one else would have bothered. You risked your life, nearly lost it, protecting us from the Empire." Her voice softened. "That creates a debt that cannot be balanced with mere technical repairs." "I don't want debt between us," Riven said, surprised by his own honesty. "Or ownership, or obligation." "What do you want, then?" The question hung in the recycled air of the medical bay, weightier than it had any right to be. Riven had spent so many years focused on survival that he'd forgotten how to want anything beyond the next meal, the next salvage score, the next safe place to sleep. "I don't know," he admitted finally, "but I'd like the chance to figure it out. Away from the Empire, away from running." Syra's expression softened. "Then we want the same thing." For the next 2 days, Riven regained his strength, while Syra tended to both him and Luma. The child's condition improved steadily, her movements becoming more coordinated, her telepathic abilities more focused. By the time they reached Station Helios, Riven could walk unassisted, though the neural damage from the soul lance left him with occasional tremors in his left hand and a persistent chill along his spine. The station itself proved to be exactly as Alex had described it, an abandoned Imperial monitoring post clinging to a nameless moon in neutral space. Its external structures were weathered by cosmic radiation and micrometeorite impacts, but the internal systems remained largely functional. "Not exactly luxurious," Riven commented as they surveyed what would become their living quarters, a former officer's cabin with basic amenities. "But defensible, and off the Imperial grid." "It's perfect," Syra replied, watching as Luma explored the unfamiliar space with cautious curiosity. "It's ours." Alex's crew helped transfer supplies from the ship, enough to last several months if carefully rationed. The smuggler himself made a show of inspecting the station's dormant communications array, pronouncing it salvageable. "Get this operational and you can monitor trading channels," he told Riven. "Might even find work as an information broker. The Empire doesn't control everything out here." As the crew prepared to depart, Alex drew Riven aside for a final word. "Don't get soft," he warned, nodding toward Syra and Luma. "They're still Imperial property according to core world law. There's always someone looking to collect the bounty." "Let them try," Riven replied, his hand reflexively moving to the weapon at his hip. Alex's laugh was sharp, but not unkind. "There he is, the infamous Riven, terror of the bazaar. I was beginning to wonder if you'd gone completely domestic." After the ship departed, Riven, Syra, and Luma were left truly alone for the first time since their flight began. The silence of the station pressed around them, broken only by the soft hum of life support systems and the occasional ping of the structure settling. "Home," Syra said quietly, testing the word. "I've never had one before." "Not really." "We'll make it work," Riven promised. "One day at a time." In the weeks that followed, they established routines and boundaries. Riven focused on ensuring their security and maintaining the station's critical systems. Syra, drawing on knowledge she'd absorbed during her Imperial captivity, worked to improve Luma's implants and manage the child's developing abilities. Luma herself blossomed in their care, free from Imperial constraints. Her telepathic powers grew alongside her physical strength. She began forming rudimentary words, though she still preferred communicating through emotional impressions and shared mental images. The first time she laughed, a bright, startled sound in response to a game Riven had improvised, the effect on all of them was profound. Syra wept silently, overcome by the normality of it. Riven found himself grinning like a fool, pride swelling in his chest for no reason he could articulate. Not all moments were so joyful. Nightmares plagued them all, Syra reliving her captivity, Riven the Soul Lance's trauma, Luma experiences she lacked words to describe but projected in terrifying clarity during sleep. On those nights, they would gather in the station's observation dome, watching distant stars until the fear subsided. 3 months into their exile, Riven succeeded in restoring the station's communications array. As Alex had suggested, they began monitoring trade channels, gathering information they could potentially barter with passing ships. "We could leave," Riven pointed out one evening as they reviewed the data they'd collected. "There are routes to the far settlements where even Imperial memory doesn't reach." Syra considered this. her fingers absently stroking Luma's luminescent hair as the child slept beside her. "Is that what you want? To keep running?" "I want whatever keeps you both safe." Her silvery eyes held his. "We're safe here. With you." The simple declaration shifted something between them, an acknowledgement of what they'd become to each other. No longer reluctant companions thrown together by circumstance, but something more deliberate, more chosen. That night, after Luma had been settled in her sleeping alcove, Syra found Riven in the observation dome. He stood before the vast viewport, gazing at the starfield beyond. "You never asked about my offer," she said, joining him at the viewport. "In the bazaar, when I said I would be yours." Riven's jaw tightened. "It wasn't an offer I would ever accept." "I know that now." Her hand found his, cool fingers interlacing with his calloused ones. "But I would like to offer something else. Not obligation, not ownership. Just this. Us. If you want it." Riven turned to face her fully, searching her expression for any trace of the imperial conditioning that had shaped her early life. He found none, only a woman making a choice of her own free will. His hand rose to cup her cheek, the gesture tentative, giving her every opportunity to withdraw. Instead, she leaned into his touch, eyes closing briefly. "I want it," he said, his voice rough with emotion long suppressed. "I want us." Their first kiss was hesitant, a careful exploration of unfamiliar territory. Syra had been designed for perfection, but never for genuine connection. Riven had forgotten what such intimacy felt like, if he had ever truly known. Yet, in that imperfect moment, something clicked into place, a recognition of shared purpose, of mutual choice, not the fulfillment of a desperate bargain made in fear, but the beginning of something freely given and received. They drew apart slowly, foreheads touching, breath mingling in the cool air of the dome. "This wasn't part of my escape plan," Syra admitted with a small smile. "Nor my scavenging schedule," Riven replied, his own smile matching hers. A soft sound from the doorway alerted them to Luma's presence. The child stood watching them, her bioluminescence brightening with what they both recognized as approval. Syra extended a hand in invitation, and Luma padded over to join them at the viewport. Riven lifted her up so she could better see the stars, her slight weight settling comfortably against his chest. "Family," Luma said aloud, one of the few words she had mastered. Her mental projection carried the fuller meaning. Chosen bonds, safety love. "Yes," Syra agreed, meeting Riven's gaze over their daughter's head. "Family." Outside the viewport, the endless field of stars stretched before them, countless worlds, countless possibilities. The Empire still ruled most of them, would still hunt them if given the chance. But here, in this forgotten corner of space, they had found something the Empire with all its power could never provide. Freedom to choose their own path, their own connections, their own definition of belonging. Under the quiet stars, they faced their unknown future together, bonded not by desperation or obligation, but by choice, by love, by the family they had built from the broken pieces of their former lives. It was enough. It was everything.